Welcome back to Beyond the Bench, the podcast from Mountain State's Legal Foundation, where we explore the cases, people, and principles shaping the fight for liberty in America. Today, we are joined by the General Counsel for Mountain State's Legal Foundation, Chairman of the Colorado Federalist Society, Vice Chair of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, Colorado Advisory Board, and former Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights, Will Trachman. Will, it's great to have you. Thank you for joining us for a conversation.
Thanks, Noah. It's great to be here. One of the fringe benefits of getting to work at Mountain State's Legal Foundation is that I can insist that I become a podcast guest.
Oh, yeah.
Soon enough. So that's what this is. And it's humbling to hear you read my bio. Go ahead and do it again, though. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm not going to lie. I'm out of breath for the first time, especially with this Colorado altitude. But obviously, I just kind of gave us a good little paragraph. But for those of you, or for those of them that may not know you, feel free to elaborate more on who you are, what you do, and how you even got to where you're at today.
Yeah, I grew up in the jewel of the Central Valley of California, Fresno. Some people call it the armpit, but I firmly reject those characterizations. And I went to Berkeley, UC Berkeley, for undergrad and law school, and survived 7 years in the Lion's Den. My wife and I met in San Francisco and then moved to Colorado in 2013, and we have 4 wonderful kids.
Nice. Made it a long way. Big trek, too.
Definitely.
So what first drew you to the Constitution as something worth defending professionally after such a long history of federal and educational work?
So I've always been just a political person and really interested in the dynamics of representative government, how things work. I remember even back as a teenager, I was really interested in the 1996 presidential primary. I just remember being interested in government and how government works, how people vote for government, and what sorts of powers government had over our lives. And so naturally, the interest there drove the constraints that government has. I was really interested in figuring out what government can't do and how to protect our liberties. I also come from very political parents. My mother was a very left-wing Democrat, and my father was an Ayn Rand follower, an objectivist, so he was ultra-libertarian. I'm kind of in the middle as a solid conservative, but the idea of the political aspect and whether government should be big or small was one that percolated through my household even at a young age.
So were you, we just had Christy on the podcast, were you the kid that also had a poster of Mount Rushmore on their wall at 13, or I don't know, where did that kind of develop?
No, not that. I mean, I definitely had like Mark McGuire on my wall probably as a kid. Maybe like a Jose Canseco Bash Brothers type thing.
Okay.
But no, I didn't have a poster of Mount Rushmore as a kid. And I guess my hobbies, apart from politics, were things like baseball cards and playing sports and doing all those things that teenagers do. But now we make it an annual tradition to go to Mount Rushmore every Memorial Day. So I guess that's going to be coming up in a few months. We'll probably load the Trachman kids into the car and head to South Dakota in a few months.
Do you notice any of the Trachman kids kind of following in the same path where they can't keep their eyes off the TV or the news or can't stop reading about it?
You know, I try my best. Sometimes it's hard to get the attention of kids, especially with screen time these days.
Oh, yeah.
To try to talk politics. But if I see gas prices going up as we did during the Biden administration, that's definitely something I'll comment on. And then lately, the gas prices in Colorado have been going down, down, down. So as we pass a gas station, I might say, thank you, President Trump, for your energy freedom policies.
Hey, $2.17 a tank. I'm not going to complain any bit about that.
We actually found it for $2 a tank.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Probably near Aurora.
Yes.
So just to kind of keep things going, how has your previous experience working as the former Deputy Assistant Secretary shaped your perspective on equal protection, as well as why is it so important to protect that amendment within education?
So there's a saying in Washington that the longer your title, the lower you are on the totem pole. So I was the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Policy and Development in the Office for Civil Rights in the U.S. Department of Education. So kind of a mouthful.
A lot of syllables.
Yeah, a lot of syllables. So obviously we had the Secretary of Education, and then my boss was the Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights, and so I was below him. And the office does civil rights work, obviously. So we do Title IX, which is the famous law that creates equality in sports at K-12 and college level. We had Title VI, which is a ban on race discrimination at educational institutions. And then the disability statutes, so the Americans with Disability Act that applies to schools, and then also Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. And you'll probably hear in like the K-12 context, kids might be on Section 504 plans if they need special assistance with their educational development. So we were monitoring compliance, issuing federal guidance, getting involved in some of the hot topics of the day, especially around like trans sports issues or affirmative action. Or just general diversity programs within schools. We had our finger on the pulse of national policy. And thank you to President Trump for doing a lot of the deregulatory work that happened in that first term.
Yeah, and especially, here in Colorado, a lot of stuff is shifting. A lot of DEI are both being taken in, put in, a lot of moving pieces. But, especially now that you've gone through a bit more, you've worked your way up the legal totem pole, but now you're here at Mountain States, and now you're getting involved in cases like Young in the Colorado Department of Corrections. So give a quick rundown of that case and how you're involved, and why is MSLF involved in the first place?
Yeah, one of the things that really gets my blood boiling is DEI training. So it's one thing to have individual employees in the workplace say, oh, it would be nice to have some diversity in the workplace. It's another for the employer itself to start mandating diversity training or equity training, as the parlance is now, to talk about implicit bias and how Caucasian employees might have fragility if they deny their part in racism. And so in the waning days of the first Trump administration, we issued guidance documents saying if you're a school and you're doing DEI training, you are probably going to be violating Title VI. And that includes things like treating students differently for the purpose of grading, or separating students for the purpose of residential advisor training in a dorm. And within days of the Biden administration taking power, they repealed that guidance as contrary to equity. I mean, they basically were saying, you can grade people differently, to grade students differently based on race. And the fact that they were getting rid of all that guidance made me want to target DEI training out of the gate when we got here. And within a few months, an open request came in for Mr. Josh Young, who is a prison guard at the Colorado Department of Corrections in Lyman, the Lyman Correctional Facility. And we saw this awful training that was being mandated and officially stamped with approval by all the Colorado agencies like the Health Equity Office and the Department of Public Health and Environment. And some of these training materials were worse than I'd even seen as official in the Department of Education. It was stuff like all whites contribute to white supremacy. There is no exception. Specifically, if you deny your part in white supremacy, that is evidence of your fragility. And then they had a policy saying that if you're at a meeting in the workplace, women and non-Caucasians need to always speak first. And if someone's interrupted, the conversation can't continue until the non-Caucasians have finished what they're saying. Imagine if this training were adopted in any workplace at all, much less a prison setting. So Josh's case immediately appealed to us, and we filed that suit in 2022. Sometimes the wheels of justice turn slowly, unfortunately. But just last week, we had oral argument before the 10th Circuit. That's the appeals court here in Denver, one step below the Supreme Court. And I was really happy. We had Josh in the courtroom. We had a hot bench of judges asking us questions. And you never know about the tea leaves as you're leaving the courthouse. But I felt like we definitely made the best case we could for Josh.
Yeah, and I mean, that whole process as well is just so fascinating, having to, curate this very articulated, very in-depth argument of 15 minutes and then, having to go and weave, the answers of these questions that the judges will ask, and then sometimes you don't even get to your first argument. And it was just very cool to watch you just kind of keep your head in, and I don't know, it was like watching prime Tom Brady in the pocket, really under pressure. It was really cool to witness and see firsthand. I've never seen anything like it.
I appreciate that. So yes, the judge did interrupt my very first introductory paragraph.
Literally like 30 seconds in. It was crazy.
Absolutely. And then the question he asked was 2 minutes podcast long. So
2.5. We clocked it. We actually did clock it.
Already, that's like 20% of my oral argument.
Yeah, that's insane. I mean, it's cool. It's cool to keep your head in those kind of situations, and it really shows maturity, a lot of experience. How many times have you argued, or I guess oral argued, in front of a bench, let alone a hot bench?
So I've been in a bunch of appellate court cases around the country, and then not always as the person who appears before the court doing the oral argument. But since I've gotten to Mountain States, I've done 4 of those appellate court arguments, 3 in the 10th Circuit and 1 in the 9th.
Is this the quickest they've butt in and asked you a couple questions? I don't know.
I think that's right. I'd have to go back and look at the other 3 that I've done since getting here, but I have a feeling this was the earliest that I've gotten a question.
Interesting. But just to rope it back in, how can retaliating against someone for speaking out also be a discrimination problem, not just a First Amendment one? Because you can just sometimes, I guess, put this in you can put this in a category, this case specifically, as a First Amendment and an equal protection case, or just discrimination.
So we have another case that looks very similar. It's called DiPiero versus Penn State University, not in a prison setting, obviously, but our client, Zach DiPiero, was subjected to really aggressive DEI training to the point where they were telling him, you got to grade students differently. He was someone who had taught in the inner city before, really felt like the soft bigotry of low expectations could hurt non-Caucasian students. And so he wanted to make sure that strict guidelines, strict grading policies were enforced because you rise to the level that you're challenged at. And so he objected to this. Eventually they forced him out. And he has brought, number one, the Title VII claim, the discrimination claim based on the fact that he's Caucasian. Number 2, this retaliation idea that if you complain about discrimination and then they demote you or they punish you, they give you a bad review, that itself is a different form of discrimination claim that's called retaliation. And then also because you're speaking out, if your employer is a public workspace, as it is at Penn State, then you've got a First Amendment problem. So Josh's case doesn't have a free speech angle, but Zach's does. And there, the lower court didn't even let him get into it, but we've appealed that. And oral argument is on the horizon. Oral argument's going to be March 19th at the 3rd Circuit in Philadelphia on that case. That'll be an exciting day.
Clock it. Make sure to be there. Tune in. We'll make sure to give you the YouTube link probably after this.
Yeah.
So what standards do courts use to evaluate equal protection claims in settings like prisons? And why does that matter for this case in particular?
So in this case, we're arguing a hostile work environment theory. And when you do that, you have to prove that the workplace is permeated with insult or ridicule. The classic case is where your colleagues are using racial epithets and you say, I can't work in this environment. You bring a lawsuit. We've leveraged that theory here in the DEI space, and the part of it that we've especially argued is that in a prison setting, it's very easy to change the workplace. You can make a prison toxic quickly. So as I was saying before, it's one thing to adopt this kind of diversity training in an office setting. That's not good. I think it's probably illegal under federal civil rights laws, but it's probably not life or limb, right? In Josh's case, however, it is life or limb. If you have a situation where there's a prisoner and you're second-guessing yourself about your implicit bias and whether you've adequately treated a prisoner differently because of their race, which is what the training says to do. If you encounter an African-American person, you need to be affirmatively treating them differently based on historic injustices. So you're always wondering in your mind, am I doing enough to treat this person differently based on their skin color, or am I going to get fired? And in a prison setting, any second that you're hesitating means a risk to your safety, and that's what Josh had to face.
Yeah, and I mean, when you talk about equal protection and even the implementation of DEI, it's kind of like a Rubik's Cube, and there's definitely many different angles, many different sides of, like you said, life and limb, and safety as a entirety. And we also have another case, Brigida versus U.S. Department of Transportation, which kind of builds off of what you just kind of touched on. So let's start off with the rundown. So let's start off of why you got involved, why you thought MSLF should get involved. So Brigida versus University or U.S. Department of Transportation.
Yeah, so Brigida predates even my arrival here. So I got here about 5 years ago after working in the first Trump administration. Brigida was actually filed in December 2015. I mentioned a few minutes ago that the wheels of justice sometimes turn slowly. That is the epitome.
Definitely some WD-40 on those wheels.
Yes, exactly. So this relates to an Obama-era policy for air traffic controller hiring. There was, when Obama started, a test if you wanted to become an air traffic controller called the ATSAT. And that test was race neutral. It had been tested and validated any number of times. And it was dumping out a good portion of people who were qualified to become air traffic controllers, and then they could apply for vacancies as the Department of Transportation posted job openings. The Obama administration decided that the pool of people who were eligible for those job listings was disproportionately white, and so they wanted to gerrymander and tinker with the test in order to get a different crop of people who could apply. So they started asking, they flushed the test, they flushed our clients' scores. Some of our clients got 100% on the ATSAT, and now they said there's going to be a new test called the biographical questionnaire and the biographical assessment, which you can already hear. Those are ominous-sounding names for a test to become an air traffic controller. And they ask things like, what was your worst subject in high school? And you get the most points if you answered science. Or how many sports did you play in high school? And you get the most points if you answered several sports. So you can see that what they're trying to do is trying to jerry-rig the test to make it so that if you were not white, your score would be higher, and then you would be in the pool of people that could apply for the vacancies. So we brought a class action on behalf of all these people that got their scores flushed and who sadly never became air traffic controllers. They forever now have to have different careers. And that class action proceeded for many years. We finally got class status in 2022, so 7 years after we filed. And now, thanks to the Trump administration, we're in the middle of mediation. So that's where it stands now. But you can imagine how the injustice that the Obama administration wrought on these really well-deserving individuals who their whole lives wanted to become air traffic controllers, how no amount of money is really going to solve for the injustice that's been done to them. And we have to make an example of the Obama and the Biden administration who fought us tooth and nail on this case. And that's what we're doing in this class action.
So when an agency targets one individual or business, right, while allowing others to operate freely, how can that undermine equal protection under the law as a whole?
Yeah, so you have to sue them, right, is what you have to do. So we have cases like Kristen Fry's case against Denver Public Schools where the school board really targeted an individual because of that criticism. And that's a case where it's the pinnacle of retaliation, where you say something, you criticize the government, you criticize the people who are making bad policy, and then they come after you. So in that case, Kristen Fry was criminally prosecuted for months because she was criticizing the school board. And you can imagine how someone's free speech could be chilled in that context. And then in the equal protection context, again, you got to sue if someone's targeting you for unequal treatment. That's how you solve it, right? Is you have to respond with lawyers, and that's why I don't laugh at lawyer jokes because I'm one of the good ones. I'm trying to protect the Constitution, protect our civil rights, and make sure that the government is held to account.
Hey, yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of people try to latch onto the bad apple stories, and there is good apples. There's a lot of good apples, especially here at MSLF for sure. And even just going back to Brigida, so how does that case illustrate the risks of agencies applying rules inconsistently without clear standards, especially at the federal level, and then kind of trickling down to state or even again back to federal levels?
Yeah. So imagine if your air traffic controller the next time you're flying was chosen based on their race or their sex or something other than the merit. It's a huge risk, not just to the legal system, not just to our clients' careers, but also to everyday travelers. Now, thankfully, based on our lawsuit and some other efforts, the Obama-era policy was repealed, we think, in 2016, although we think the Biden administration was getting sneaky and doing some of the same stuff with different titles. But really, the risk is enormous because anytime you tinker with merit, tinker with equality, skills, the ability to actually get the job done, especially in a high stakes industry where there's always going to be surprises. There's always going to be weather. There's always going to be technological issues where a plane might have a malfunction. You want the best people for the job. So if the government starts aiding and abetting the discrimination, or really manufacturing the discrimination here, you're going to have phenomenal risk to personal safety.
So emphasis on the subject of character, right, over anything else, really. I mean, merit as well, so it's not so much race, sex, putting on these labels, but focusing on what really matters.
Yeah, I mean, when I land, right, if I take a flight somewhere, we're going to Philadelphia for DPR's oral argument in March, the last thing I'm going to be thinking about is the race of my air traffic controller.
Or even like pilots, you know what I mean? Like, I don't care who comes on the PA as long as I know I'm on the ground and safe.
Right? Couldn't care less.
Yeah, honestly, I'm gonna clap regardless.
Are you one of those people that
No,
claps?
I'm not. No,
I was worried that
but there are people out there that probably would. So why should people who don't see themselves reflected in these sorts of cases still care deeply about even their outcomes?
Well, you could be next. I mean, when
Could happen to anybody.
Yeah, when Denver Public Schools comes after Kristen Fry, that's not just because they want to punish Kristen Fry for her speech. It's because they want to intimidate the next person who's on the fence and thinking, oh, do I want to criticize my local government, or do I want to just keep my head down and hope that I'm not the victim of criminal prosecution and my family's not affected? So you have to support the work of the people like Mountain States and other firms like us that are doing the work to protect the Constitution, so it's there for you tomorrow, the next day, a year from now, for your kids, for your grandkids. If you let things slide and hope that you're just going to get by and go along to get along, you have a different thing coming. We have a unique opportunity right now. Some of the threats at the federal level are gone. We need to be focusing on localities and states and broad-based victories to make sure that we entrench the progress that we're making in D.C.
Is there any cases that you're maybe keeping your eye on that involve equal protection that aren't even talked about, maybe even too deep in depth on this podcast at MSLF, or that you think might be highlighting the future of equal protection?
Well, we have another case called Strickland that we're litigating, and really there the question is about what do you do if the sides kind of agree that the equal protection violation happened, and how far back in time do you have to go to remedy it? So our clients suffer discrimination under the Biden administration, and their bank accounts are lower than they otherwise would be. They're farmers who were white or men, and the Biden administration had a disaster relief policy that discriminated based on race and sex. And now the question is, do you just fix the problem going forward, or do you also go back in time and try to fix that problem? Does that mean you have to claw back money from the farmers and ranchers who got extra money? Does it mean you have to give everybody in the universe who would have otherwise gotten the money more and have the government spend a lot more money than it otherwise would? Those are just very complicated questions that I like to think about at night when I'm trying to go to sleep.
Yes, just stare at the ceiling and think about my national federal cases.
Yeah, nerd alert, right? But I'm definitely not one to leave it at the office. I'll take it home with me no matter what.
No, it's okay. I'm the same way with media, with podcasts. I'm always thinking about what's the next thing to record. What can I ask? It's a little bit juicier, spicier, as you used. I think talking about the last oral argument, spicy. So is there anything that you think we didn't talk about that you would like to highlight or discuss?
Well, I like to think of us as warriors for the Constitution. We have a great army. I'm just one of the lawyers we have here. And of course, you're part of the team. You're doing a terrific job as our comms staff. And there's just, no way that we could do all the work that we're doing without a big team of people. And, what we need to make sure is that our team has the tools they need to go forward to keep the work going.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you were to leave listeners with one question from today's conversation, what would it be?
Well, I always think about the world that I'm leaving. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I've got 4 kids. I'm hoping, knock on wood, someday for grandkids. But then after I'm gone, I'm going to want the Trachman legacy to be one that people remember. And I want them to say that guy fought for freedom, that guy fought for the liberties of the next generation. And ask yourself, if you're listening to this right now, what are you doing to protect liberty, to protect the Constitution? Are you doing enough? Are you happy? Or is there something more that you can do? Because if America is going to continue to be the most exceptional country in the world, we have to act like it. We have to protect that legacy. And so that's why I'm at Mountain States. I'm not at a big firm in downtown Denver. I'm doing the hard work every day of trying to protect our rights and our liberties. And I can't wait to go to work in the morning. And I hope that if someone's listening to this right now and wants to join me in this fight, that they pick up the phone and call me.
How can you be a patriot without supporting the Patriots? So I don't know.
Is that a football joke?
That is a football joke. I'm completely rooting for the Seahawks, but it's true. It's true. What steps are you taking to kind of make a difference, both locally, statewide, as well as even federally? And there's plenty of ways to do that as well. So, Will, thank you for joining us and for your insight into the ongoing fight to preserve our constitutional freedoms. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to subscribe and follow Beyond the Bench wherever you get your podcasts. And visit mslegal.org to learn more about how you can stand with us in defending the Constitution. My name is Noah Dasenkow, joined by William Trachman, and we will see you next time to go Beyond the Bench.
Thanks, Noah.